Well, welcome to 2014. And I know this is a time when a lot of us think about making some changes, and we think about what we're going to do in 2014 differently, how we're going to be stronger, faster, fitter, better, smarter, better looking, grow more hair, grow less hair in some cases, and all kinds of things we're going to do. We're going to go to Loving Laser and get stuff removed, and someone's going to have stuff tucked and nipped and all that, and this is going to be your best year ever, and I really hope it is. I hope this is your best year ever. I think it can be. I think that 2014 can be your absolute best year ever if you learn a few things from God Himself. If you learn a few things from Him. I think that that when you see these slides that we saw up here, and you sing that song, and you realize that we're here to worship the maker, creator of the universe, we could get things right if we would understand that this maker, creator of the universe loves us. And He's interested in you, and He's interested in me. And He cares about you, and He cares about what happens to you and in your life. Sometimes I think as Christ followers, we slide off into this idea of that we are a self-improvement project, that we need to improve ourselves some way, somehow. And today I want to leave you with a lot of hope. And I don't want you to leave here believing that 2014 is up to you, that it's just up to you and what you do. And if you can just gut it out and be stronger and better than you've ever been, then you'll have your best year ever. I just don't think it's going to go that way. I have never succeeded on that path. Maybe you have, but I've just never succeeded as a personal improvement project that I do all by myself. This isn't like a Home Depot thing where, like I can do it and they can help, or I can do it and I can help myself, or whatever. Or if I pull myself up by my bootstraps, it's going to be okay. I've learned a lot that, man, I just don't have very strong bootstraps. And I just can't quite get up there by myself. And so I've got great news. If you're like me at all, if you've ever failed at a New Year's resolution, this could be your best year ever. Because I'm going to show you how to deal with that. Wouldn't that be cool? If you left here with a little more hope and a little more refreshed and a little more joyful and peaceful, and you could have your best year ever. That's what I hope for you. I want to talk to you about how to have the most rockin' life ever. How to have a really rockin' life in 2014. How to have a life that's beyond imagination. How to have a life that's blessed by God. Jesus introduces us to a term in Matthew chapter 5 that I'm not going to go there yet, but I just want you to hang on to this. He introduces us to people who are blessed by God, or if I was preaching it right, I'd say you were blessed, okay? But you're blessed by God, and the Greek word for that is makarios, and makarios is beyond our imagination. It's the absolute best possible life that you can have. Makarios is to be blessed. And so today, when you leave, I want you to leave with a sense of being in makarios and being blessed by God in an amazing way, so that you can walk out of here and have your best year ever. And that would be my hope for you, that this would be your best season ever. There's all kinds of illusions about who God is and what God does, and we get some of those from songs. Some of them, Mike, like you mentioned a while ago, some of them from worship songs. Some of them are magnificent, and they remind us of who God really is and how He really operates. Some songs are from the pit, like Bette Midler's song. Remember that song? From a Distance, God is watching us. Remember that song? Remember the lyrics? Yeah, from a distance, God is watching us, and He's. Yeah, I can't even remember right now. It's kind of locked up. But this. Yeah. Yeah. It's just wrong. It's not true. It's not true. But if you live your life as a Christ follower and you have that Bette Midler song, oh, from a distance, God is watching me, and He's just watching me struggle through things, and He's just watching me, and He's from a distance, God is watching me, and we're all the same from a distance because, He's so, the reason that God treats us all the same is because He's colorblind, because He's so far away He can't see us. It's not true. You see, here's the good news, is that the creator, maker of the universe is not watching us from a distance. He's right here with us. And the good news of Jesus Christ was that God is with us. God is among us. And so I'm going to begin to work in this series on how to have a really rockin' life. And I'm going to ask you and invite you to join me. I'm going to ask you to just obliterate one of your New Year's objectives Some of you already made a New Year objective. I'm going to read the entire Bible in 2014. Good for you. Now, if you've never read it, I encourage you to stay on that path. However, if you've already read the Bible a time or two or three or four, how about let's go deeper into some of the things that Jesus said? What if we spent the first part of 2014 really studying Jesus and what he had to say? And we dove deep there. I'm going to take the month of January and I'm going to zero in on 3 chapters in the book of Matthew. It's the greatest sermon ever preached. I'm not even going to attempt to preach it the way Jesus preached it, but we will learn a lot from Jesus, Matthew 5 to 7. And I'm going to ask you just to camp out there and to be really present in those scriptures. And I'm going to encourage you to take the month of January and read those 2 or 3 times a week and to prayerfully engage those scriptures and to wonder, what does Jesus mean by his words in this greatest sermon ever preached? What's he really saying, and what's he want to do in my life? And how can I have this blessed life, this Makarios kind of life that Jesus invites us into? I think you'll find it as you study who Jesus really was and what he said and what he meant in these scriptures. So if you want to revise that, one of your objectives, I would encourage you to maybe go deeper in a few scriptures instead of broad in all the scriptures. And let's zero in specifically on what Jesus said, because here's what I believe about Jesus. And I believe that Jesus was literally God. So he was with God in the beginning, and he was God. So he was there creating everything. And until Jesus stripped himself of his godness to come to earth and wrap himself in human flesh, he encountered all that God had encountered. And he that was timeless became bound by time. And he that was beyond pain became bound by pain. And he that was beyond human flesh wrapped himself up in human flesh. So I believe that when Jesus came to earth, he was a full embodiment of God himself. He was indeed God. He was the God-man. He was both fully human and fully God. Now, I know some of you technically minded folks, scientifically minded folks, this is going to be a real problem for you. And that's okay. Again, as I say, sometimes you don't have to agree with me on everything, but let's just, let's talk through this and consider the claims of Jesus. Consider who he claimed to be. He claimed to be God himself. He didn't claim just to be a teacher or a prophet or a nice guy, although he was all those things. He was more than that too. He was God himself. So, if God is on the planet and God is speaking, has there ever been anyone who was smarter or wiser than him? No. I believe that Jesus Christ wasn't just a great teacher. He was the most powerful teacher of all time because he was God. I believe he is the wisest person of all time because he was God. I believe he can teach us how to lead a life of being blessed better than anybody else because he knows how we're wired. He was there in the drawing room when God was beginning to think about humans and what humans would be like and how we would be wired and how our nature would be and how we would be created. And Jesus could see from the very, very beginning before there was time to the very end where there is no time. He could see all of that with God. And then he stepped into flesh and he began to walk among us and teach us this God-man. So, and in addition to that, I also believe that Jesus really did die on a cross, that he was really, really dead. He didn't just faint, that he really was dead, and that he was raised again by the power of God to take away the power of death. So he overcame death, the ultimate enemy of all of us, right? So if this man, who's God-man, who overcame death, and he's teaching, should we listen to his words? Yeah, I think we should take them to heart. I think we should own those words deep down inside of us and teach and treat this like this is the most powerful, pertinent, important teaching I've ever seen or heard in my life. There is nothing you've ever heard that's more powerful or more clear, more hopeful than the teachings of Jesus Christ. So for the month of January, I would just encourage you, dive into this Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 to 7 is what we know it as, the Sermon on the Mount, and just wonder with me. What does God want to say to me? What's he want to do through me? And this is what my hope is for us as a body of Christ here at Phos Community Church, that we would take the words of Jesus seriously and live them out practically in our world. And as we do that, I promise not only will your life be changed, but this whole community will change because they'll begin to encounter us as people who follow Jesus. And that would be really powerful. Okay? So So here's some things you can do to really get ready for this. Number one, be here every Sunday. Make notes. You've got a sermon note card. You make notes on that. Read through Matthew 5-7 several times, and then just ask the Holy Spirit to work with you as you encounter that. Now, Courtney, I want to back up one screen. I want to go into this one. Here's the working foundations. Also, just so you know, the framework for the teachings I'm going to be sharing. This is what my theological assumptions are. These are things that I'm working from. I don't want to leave these out there because I think you could get sidetracked if you don't know these. So go ahead and put them on the table. Here's my cards. We're saved by Jesus alone, by grace alone, through God alone. You are not saved because you're good. You're not saved because you try harder. You're not saved because you keep your 2014 resolutions. We're saved by God alone, by grace alone. The mission of Phos Community Church is to make disciples who make disciples who make disciples. We don't have 17 missions. We don't have 37 hills that we would die on, and we have one. And this is the one. That people come to know Christ, grow up in Him, that their lives are transformed. This is what, you know what I want for you? As your pastor, I love you guys, I really do. What I want for you more than anything is that for you to be transformed from the inside out into a full-on child of God, who will reap all the blessings and benefits that Jesus promises, that will live the kind of life that Jesus calls us to, a life of a fully blessed child of God who takes adventures with Jesus. That's what I want for you. That's what I want. And that then you would turn around and help somebody else do the same thing. And that you would become a disciple, or I like the word apprentice better, because in the modern imagination, in the church imagination of 2014, many churches have used the word discipleship to mean that you know a lot of stuff. You got your head in the game and you've learned a lot of Bible stuff. That's good. We should learn a lot of Bible stuff. But it disconnects at that point, and we think, well, a disciple is a person that knows a lot of stuff. That was not Jesus' idea of a disciple. Jesus' idea of disciple, the New Testament concept of a disciple, was a person that was an apprentice of Jesus. It was a person that would learn a lot about Jesus, but then would do the things that Jesus did. The way Jesus taught in his environment was he taught disciples to become apprentices. They weren't just people that knew stuff. They were people that lived their lives as followers of Jesus. They risked everything to follow Jesus. Make sense? So it's bigger than that. So this discipleship process is an apprenticeship process where you apprentice yourself to Jesus. And you learn from Him. You learn His words, His teachings, His ways, and then you begin to live out those teachings and His way of life, the Jesus way of living. And inside of that, you will find this makarios, this blessed life that we're talking about. Okay? Make sense? All right, let's jump on. Matthew 5:1. Seeing the crowds, Jesus went up on a mountain and He sat down, and His disciples came to Him. Now let me frame this up. In the book of Matthew, Matthew runs through pretty quickly the origin of Jesus and then gets into Jesus' early ministry. And in Matthew 4 it says this, that Jesus went around into the area surrounding Jerusalem and out into the countryside. He began to teach and He began to heal people. And many people that had demons and people that were possessed by evil ideas and people that were lame and sick were healed by Jesus, were touched by Him, and it made a difference. And crowds began to swell, and people began to follow Him. And the word spread about Jesus, this great healer that would take care of things and make things right in your life. So people flocked to Him, and they were coming to Him. Jesus had also just chosen His intimate 12 followers. He had chosen them, and they were following with Him, and this large crowd of people was following Him. And they loved hearing from this itinerant teacher, this man who would walk among them and heal them and change them and look at them and encounter them. But this man was also controversial. You see, Jesus was coming up against a religious establishment that was teaching some things about God that weren't true. It's important to know the context that Jesus is going to speak into here in just a minute. After Jesus finished the Sermon on the Mount, it wraps up the Sermon on the Mount, and at the end of chapter 7 it says this, and when Jesus finished these sayings, this sermon, the crowds were so astonished at His teaching, for He was teaching them as one who had authority and not as their scribes, not as the religious leaders. He was teaching them differently. It's like He owned the content of what He was teaching. It's like He understood it at the human level. He understood that when He taught, He was teaching for impact. And this is different. In the United States right now, when a person teaches in our school systems and in our colleges and universities, sometimes we teach just for content. And this would be a mistake for you to make. as a Christ follower, as you listen to the words of Jesus, Jesus is not teaching just for content. He just doesn't want you to know a bunch of stuff. He's teaching for life impact and for transformation. And this was common of teachers in Jesus' time. They taught for transformation. They taught for you to be different. They taught for you to be impacted by what they said. So Jesus would use strange sayings, and he would stretch things, and he would make these incredible contrasts that would help a person understand his teaching. Also understand that Jesus was teaching to a culture that was steeped in stories. They were a culture that was used to telling stories to help transfer truth. And so Jesus teaches by story and by example and by concrete examples around him. If he was near a grapevine, he would teach about being connected to God by the same way that grapes are connected to the grapevine and the way that the grapes bore a lot of fruit because they're connected. He would teach those ways. So understand who you're dealing with when you hear from Jesus. Jesus is not teaching for content. He's not teaching for you to memorize a bunch of stuff. He's teaching you for you to get it with your life and to be changed from the inside out. There's a big difference. So here we go. Let's listen to the Beatitudes. I'm just going to run them straight through. I'm going to read them straight through, and I just want you to hear them as the words of Jesus. And he opened his mouth, and he taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely for my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For they so persecuted the prophets who came before you. This is the run-through of the blessed, of this Makarios type people, the ones who are blessed by God, who live this extraordinary life. And so the way I could preach this is this. I could say, if you will be like this, if you will do these things, if you would make these your 2014 resolutions, let's go back, Courtney, one screen. If you would make it your aim to be poor in spirit, then you would get the kingdom of God. If you'll just mourn a lot, then you'll get the kingdom of God. If you're meek and you never say a word and you just slip into the sidewalk, into the cracks, and you never make a ripple in life, then the kingdom would belong to you. If you're, I could teach it this way, but I don't think that's what Jesus meant. And this will be shocking to you. I think Jesus meant more. I think he said more. And if we can get this right, then you could have the most rockin' life ever in 2014. But if you get this wrong, you'll be more miserable than ever. So, and this message, by the way, I need to go ahead and own it, is really for Christ followers. If you claim to be a Christ follower, then this message is for you. If you're not sure you want to be a Christ follower, this may cause you to think about it several more times before you decide you really want to do this. All right? But it might also be the best news you've ever heard. So let's look at this a little closer. Remember who Jesus was speaking to. Jesus had gathered a crowd of people that were following him. Most of these people were broken and busted somehow. Something had happened in their life. Most of these people were not part of the in crowd. These people had actually been oppressed and pushed out of the religious system. Not only was the territory ruled by Rome, and the Romans were occupying their territory with armed guard, they were also under a religious oppression. The Jews had grown up knowing that they were chosen people of God. And they began to establish an elaborate system of religious culture. And in that culture, you had to know a lot of stuff, and you had to be favored to be in the in crowd. And the religious establishment was very firmly entrenched, and they were very oppressive. And if you didn't walk a certain way and talk a certain way and know a certain body of knowledge, and if you weren't educated, and if you weren't somewhat wealthy, then the assumption was that you were out. You were out. You weren't in, because the in crowd knew all the scriptures. The in crowd, from the time they were little, had been taught in their religious schools. They knew all the right things about God. They had lots of scripture memorized. And they would come to the synagogue to worship. And they were in, and they felt very comfortable in the religious establishment. So if you were in, you assumed everybody else was out. And if you were out, you knew it. You didn't fit in somehow. You didn't have the right clothes. You didn't have the right education. You weren't raised in church. You didn't know all this stuff, so it was an intimidating experience for you to be around it. And these were the kinds of people that were flocking to Jesus. The crowd that was out was coming to Jesus. So watch what he says. If you're poor in spirit, if you know you're out, if you know you're not in the religious establishment, then this kingdom is for you. Okay? If you mourn, if your life is just in shambles and your life is busted and broken and things just aren't working out the way you think they should, if 2013 was a really hard year for you and you're just mourning that a little bit and you're trying to let that go and shake the dust off and turn your sights to 2014, you're going to be comforted. You see, the news was not that here's another list of stuff to do or to be. As a matter of fact, this list, if you make this into a list of more things to do that Jesus is piling on, some more stuff for you to do, then you erase the grace of God. And you erase the work of Jesus. And instead of trying to live by the Old Testament commandments, now you make these new commandments of Jesus and you try to live by them. And it's going to leave you more destitute than ever and more hopeless than ever and more broken than ever. Instead of these being words of hope, they become crushing commandments that we can't keep. So what do they mean? Jesus keeps talking about this kingdom, this kingdom, this kingdom, this kingdom. He's talking about this kingdom. What kingdom? The kingdom of God. Who's the king of this new kingdom, of this kingdom that's here among us? Who's the king? It's Jesus. Jesus is saying, there is a new kingdom. There's this kingdom among you. I'm here. I'm not at a distance. I'm not somewhere far off watching you and leaving you alone. I'm here with you. The king and the kingdom is here among you right now. So because this king and this kingdom are here, here's how you're in this kingdom. If you've always felt like you were out, then you can be in. If you've mourned because you're not part of the in crowd, then you can be in. If you've always been left out of the religious games in the religious circle, then you can be in. This is a new kind of king, and this is a new kind of kingdom that Jesus is announcing. It's not one based on religion. And if you make this list another set of religion, then you're going to struggle and you're not going to be able to do it. People have tried for years. As a matter of fact, there are some followers of Christ who read this in a manner that makes them believe that the only way to follow Jesus is to be destitute. That's a misreading of this text. Because Jesus also had rich followers who followed him well, who did leave all their possessions behind and follow him, and some who held on to the possessions and still followed him because that was the path. Jesus had poor followers and rich followers, and he even had followers who understood what it meant to be meek. Let's go to the next one, verse 5. Blessed are the meek. You see, the meek, it doesn't mean that you're mousy. So you could misread that and say, well, in 2014, if I'm just really mousy, then I'll be blessed. I'll have this macarious life. No, you won't. You'll just be miserable. You were made to be creative. God created you to create and to work with him under his kingship, to bring his kingdom to bear on the earth and to create with him. Isn't this good news? Those of you guys who have this creative urge and this desire and drive to make a difference in the world, it comes from God. But to be meek is to take your personal power, your personal kingdom, and submit it to his kingdom, to his lordship. Isn't that good news? So be creative and work with God and bring your talents and your abilities and the best you've got into his game. Don't play small, play big, and then allow God to work with you. But don't set up your own kingdom, set up his kingdom. Use your talents, your abilities, and be meek enough to let him rule what you do. Makes sense? And be merciful. And yeah, thirst for doing things right and being righteous. Verse 8, blessed are the pure in heart. This is good news for some of you. Some of you are really pure in heart. You're so pure in heart that you're a perfectionist. And I got to tell you, you're pretty miserable to be around. It's just true. You perfectionists drive the rest of us crazy. Because we never, ever get it right enough for you. You always have a critique. You always have something to say about what's wrong with what it is, whatever it is. You can nitpick things to death. You can make everybody around you crazy. And you do, a lot of times. But here's the good news. Even for the perfectionist, Jesus says you can be in. Because you finally found somebody who is perfect. In this king of this kingdom, there is somebody who's perfect. By the way, it's not you. Just saying. Okay? That you believe you are perfect, you're not. But even in that, if you will own that you're making your own self miserable sometimes by your drive for perfection, perfection is not required for this kingdom. So what is it? How does one get into Jesus' kingdom? If it's not this list, if it's not doing this stuff, then what is it that makes a person in the kingdom of Jesus? In this new king, this king that's walking among us. What is it to be in his kingdom? How does one get in? How are you in the kingdom of Jesus? Yeah, that's it. Bob, that is it right there. You accept his grace and we admit the king is here. I'm going to take my life, whether I'm rich or whether I'm poor, whether I'm in or whether I'm out, whether I'm religious or not religious, whether I was raised in Sunday school or I don't even know how to open my Bible, whether I can win the Bible drill or I can't even find where the verse is. No matter where you are, where you come from, you're in because of the grace of Jesus. That's the message of these beatitudes. Blessed are you. The Makarios, this blessed life comes from submitting your life to this new king. Now, Jesus was talking to a crowd of outcasts when he said these things, so it made them in. Now, if Jesus, I believe this, if Jesus had taught in a different context and he was talking to those of us like me who was raised in a Southern Baptist church that went to Sunday school that knew a lot of Bible, I was blessed by that and I'm grateful for that. I wouldn't change that heritage at all. But if he came into my little church where I was raised and he talked to us, he would say to us, yeah, you're blessed because you know that stuff, but you see that person over there, look across the street, the person driving down the road who's never been to Sunday school, who doesn't even own a Bible. They can be in just like you are. They can be blessed too. And it's not blessed by doing stuff. And it's not blessed by becoming any of these things. You're blessed because there is a king who wants to bless you. And you accept that blessing by faith. You accept that blessing by saying, you know, I accept this goodness of this king who wants to invite me into his kingdom. Isn't that good news? Isn't that great? So 2014 could be your best year ever, this Makarios kind of year that I want you to have the most Rockin year ever. Be blessed by the king by accepting his kingship in your life by faith. And saying, all right, I believe that this Jesus is the Son of God. And I believe in him so much that I'm willing to order my life around his priorities. That I'm willing to take my little kingdom and put it under his big kingdom. And I'm willing to make my agenda his agenda. And where my agenda is out of line with his, I'll let go of those things and I'll come into alignment with his kingdom. And I will walk with this king who walks among us and who loves me and who promises to provide for me. And who promises to love me and to take me from this life, this kingdom that, by the way, can start now. This isn't just fire insurance that Jesus is talking about. Matter of fact, I'm looking in this. Do you see any fire insurance policy in there? And what Jesus is saying? That all I came for was just to make sure that when you die, you get to go to heaven? Is that what Jesus said in any of this? No. He's talking about life right now. This life in 2014. can be blessed if you will submit to the King. So no matter whether you are busted and broken and your life is torn up, and sometimes by your own choice your life is messed up, Jesus still loves you. Or whether you've been striving for perfection for years and you're almost there, you're pretty sure, God still loves you. There's even a place for you in this kingdom. So wherever you come from, whoever you are, this kingdom and this king is for you. That's the good news of the Beatitudes.